It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Thursday, the 4th of July. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, he's produced the program. We are looking forward to speak with you this morning. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. Which is 8626. So, as people know, this province has produced some absolute top-quality ball hockey players, and that was on display this past weekend in Switzerland, where Team Canada made their way over to participate in the World Championships. Came home with a bronze medal. Congratulations to the team, including 8 members of the team from Newfoundland and Labrador, including Maggie Jones, Jenny Simpson, Amanda Keane, Kristen Coos, Jill Mason, Sarah Davis, Haley Ryan, and Dawn Tuck. Congratulations to you all. Imagine 8 of the members of the Team Canada from here. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Good stuff. All right, congratulations, Ryan Clough. So Chloe had a pretty solid NHL career. Played for 10 seasons. He was behind the bench as assistant coach in New Jersey. He was the head coach for a while for the Newfoundland Growlers, and now he's been named the assistant general manager of the San Jose Sharks, where he also played some of his 10 seasons. So on top of, being able to be in the front office of an NHL team, San Jose, you talk about rebuilding, they get to do it around what they call a generational player, the first overall pick, Macklin Celebrini. So congratulations to Ryan Clough. Of course, not the only person from this province in a NHL front office. Derek Clancy, who I played with, is the assistant general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's a bit of a different story for the Leafs. And the glass ceiling broken one more time in the NHL. Jessica Campbell is going to become the first full-time female coach in the NHL. She's the assistant coach of the Seattle Kraken. Last season, well, I guess the past 2 seasons, she was the assistant coach for the affiliate of the Kraken and Coachella Valley. A matter of fact, Coachella Valley just made it to the Calder Cup Finals, lost to the Hershey Bears. But so she was there for 2 years. The head coach was Dan Blyesma. He was a former NHLer. He's now the head coach of the Seattle Kraken, and he brought Jessica Campbell along with him. So pretty interesting stuff. So that's a glass ceiling that has been bust. Congratulations to Jessica Campbell. And not the only female with high-profile job. Cami Granato is an assistant general manager. She was a pro scout for the Vancouver Canucks, and now she's the assistant general manager as of 2022. So first female full-time assistant coach in the NHL. And happy Independence Day to the Americans who are tuned into the program from wherever you are this morning. Lots of Americans living here in this province as well. And of course, it's a federal holiday in the United States. Commemorates the ratification of the Declaration of Independence by the Second Continental Congress on the 4th of July of 1776, establishing the Republic of the United States of America. And also, it was on this date in 1939 that Lou Gehrig became the first MLB player to have his number retired on his appreciation day at Yankee Stadium. And of course, it came with one of the most famous speeches, about a minute long, and it was dead silence at Yankee Stadium. It was about 62,000 people in attendance, where he uttered, "Today," we talk about his MLS diagnosis. He said, "Yet today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." Pretty interesting stuff. And if you're tuned into Wimbledon, unfortunately, Felix Auger-Aliassime got dispatched in 5 sets yesterday. I watched the 5th set. It was actually pretty good. But one of the most famous tennis matches on the men's side of all time, 1981, John McEnroe ends Bjorn Borg's streak of 5 straight Wimbledon titles with a famous 4-6, 7-6, 7-6, 6-4 victory at the All England Club. I can remember that particular match. Okay, let's keep going. So this is an interesting, albeit somewhat vague story regarding Marine Atlantic. Now, we all know the issues regarding the Argentia run and the delays regarding the Alasunu. I'm not exactly sure what's wrong with the vessel, but anyway, there's a delay. This is a letter from the Minister of Transportation, federally, Pablo Rodriguez, written to Gary O'Brien, who's the chairperson at Marine Atlantic. And it says, "Dear Gary, I am pleased to inform you of the shareholders' recent decisions regarding Marine Atlantic Incorporated. Number one, Marine Atlantic Incorporated's overall 65% cost recovery model is discontinued effective immediately. Marine Atlantic Incorporated continues to be expected to recover through revenue 100% of the incremental costs of offering services that are beyond the constitutional obligation." All right, then they talk about money coming from the federal budget. $17.6 million in top-up funding in 24-25, $139.5 million in 25-26 to support ongoing operations. Okay, it was retweeted and applauded by Minister Andrew Parsons, but my question would be, if the 65% cost recovery model is discontinued immediately, what is it replaced with? So that's long been one of the concerns regarding the rates for passage on Marine Atlantic ferries. But I guess the simple question is, okay, if that's gone, it's replaced by what? Because they continue to have to recover 100% of operational costs with fares. So exactly what does this mean? So we'll see if we can't get Minister Parsons on to help explain a little further exactly what the implications are of this Marine Atlantic decision, or I guess a federal government decision. Sounds like good news, but a little bit more detail would be helpful. And good news for the folks who are residents of Churchill Falls, some 750 strong. Of course, they evacuated on the 19th of June, and they were made their way to Happy Valley Goose Bay, the most of them. So the evacuation order has been lifted. I guess the fires have been held at bay, which is absolutely terrific news. And I hear a birdie whisper in my shoulder, in my ear, that sometime this summer we're actually going to get some updates regarding Churchill Falls Generating Station and the 2041 contract. We really need to have some of that information because a lot of people out there listening to the program this morning think that that's the panacea. All our ills and woes, financially speaking, will be settled and solved on that date in 2041, but not so sure. Also, read Uncle Gnarly's blog, and it was interesting. Talk about profits recorded at Newfoundland Labrador Hydro. The one question that I think remains unanswered is, yes, for ratepayers to know that there's some protection. People like to call it rate mitigation. And the announcement was $2 billion over 6 years, $700 million per year to start the Muskrat Falls rate at 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour and a increase every year thereafter. So it was only for 6 years. No answer or understanding as to what happens after 6 years. But it wasn't that long ago that one of the questions we would ask of the provincial government in the budget lock-in is how much money is being transferred from the government to the Crown Corporation that was once Nalcor. Now they have rebranded to go back to Newfoundland Labrador Hydro. So if it's Hydro's money going into this rate mitigation, and of course there's all different pots of rate mitigation money, we don't need to go through all of them right now, but does that simply mean that we're just shuffling the deck chairs around? So if that money's into the rate mitigation, does that mean in provincial budgets in the years to come that there'll simply be a reinstigation of the transfer dollars to the Crown Corp? Not so sure, but you won't take it on. Let's go. And in the world of heating or cooling your home, there is a pretty widespread heat pump recall. Apparently, there's some 30 or 5,500 of these units that are on recall. So they're the Daikin, Amana, and Goodman brands. So apparently, if there's some sort of power interruption, your unit can move from air conditioning your home to heating your home. Now, there's been no reported injuries anywhere in Canada or the United States regarding this particular power interruption and shift from AC to heat. And Health Canada is saying that possibly it could be a problem, that it may overheat your home to the point where it can be injurious. Anyway, so if you have one of those models, check in with your provider, the installer, and the retailer, because the recall is now on. Okay, there's a corrective update available for those heat pumps, and hopefully that can be helpful to you if you have one of them. Okay, and on that front, it's interesting stories out there. And we know in this province, the death-to-birth rate has been lopsided for many, many years. Deaths outweighed births by some 2,700 in this province alone. And some of the stories nationally that I read this morning regarding cost of living, especially rent and housing, and the potential to start a family. And so apparently there are a ton of people between the ages of 21 and 29 who say that they're going to have to delay starting a family because of what? The cost of housing. Now, I think you can add to it daycare and what have you, even though we've moved to this $10 a day, which is cart before the horse because we don't have enough required spaces. But the affordability issue is fascinating. So Canada's fertility rate dropped in 2022 to the lowest point in more than a century. 1.33 children per woman. So at that stage, we are trending in a really precarious direction. And this is not, any sort of judgment about whether or not you want to have a family, whether or not you're a husband and wife, or husband and husband, wife and wife, whatever the case may be. But that fertility rate continues to go in a sour direction. Add into it, at the exact same time, the aging demographic of the country is rapidly changing upwards as well. So I just think that's, really quite something. I guess it stands to reason. When you plan to have a family, you look at all the potential issues of having one. So whether it be access to daycare, where you live, living in a school neighborhood. And yes, it'll be about issues regarding housing, because if you live in a 500 square foot apartment in Toronto costing yourself $1,550 per month, the ability to have a baby with ample space to roam is compromised with simply just the cost of rent, which is at an all-time high in the country as well. So I thought that was an interesting story. All right, we are awaiting, these are just some broad strokes, the long-term care personal care home review. Unbelievably, we don't have it in hand as of yet. Also, the shelter review apparently coming very shortly, we're told by the government. But of course, that they also told us that it'd be out on the 3rd of June, and here we are on the 4th of July, and still not in hand. But that's an important feature. People ask me all the time, why do we spend so much time focusing in on homelessness and the most vulnerable? Why? Because it comes with a significant cost, whether it be financially and or morally, in my personal opinion. And if you just want to focus in on cost, and we've referenced this before, but the relationship between homelessness and healthcare is very real. And this is the most recent survey coming from 1,000 admissions at the teaching hospital in Toronto. And this showed very distinct numbers. You are twice as likely to be hospitalized if you're homeless. In addition to that, you're going to stay twice as long in the hospital because of your complex medical needs, and consequently cost twice as much. So if you're simply focusing on the bottom line and the amount of money we spend on a variety of things, healthcare, of course, the most expensive option or a line item in the country, if we spend twice as much on folks who are homeless, it just stands to reason that refunding some of that money to have them in more healthy surroundings, a roof over their head, just makes all the sense in the world. That's why, for some people who say, hey, get a job, stay in school, get a job, fend for yourself, keep the wolf away from the door through your own accord. I get that. Totally get it. As a fellow who's worked since being a teenager, but the fact is, when people fall through the cracks and the different circumstances of life, you find yourself homeless, it costs us a lot of money. So even if you're one of those fiscal hawks, that would be an opportunity to understand that, hey, doing this better, getting it right, versus how we currently provide shelter, how we currently approach the issue of homelessness, which is also fatally flawed. Just look at how much money we spend on these emergency shelters. Only province in the country that pays private landlords to shelter folks who otherwise would not have a roof over their head. And it's not working, and it's dangerous, and all the rest of it. And in the world of healthcare, so, Mun's Medical School. Now, there's only 17 medical schools in the entire country. There's a success rate for Canadians to get into medical school is around 7.5%, and of course, that's woefully low. There's about 2,900 positions available for first-year classes in 21-22. Mun's Med School is going to expand the number of seats. So going from 80 to 85 in September, add another 5 seats in 2025 September. Also very good news, but we also have to ensure that the vast majority are set aside for people from this province, for the obvious reasons. You're from here, you train here, you're more likely to stay here. And every single graduate should come with a 5-year return and service agreement. So right now, 69 seats for Newfoundland and Labrador residents. That's up 5 because New Brunswick used to have 5 of those seats. They gave them up, but we took them on. So good story to see that the expansion at Mun's Med School, but I'll wonder aloud one more time, is how come there's so few med schools in the country? Every single province is talking about the shortage of healthcare professionals throughout the entire gamut of healthcare professionals, but notably doctors, and more specifically family doctors. So in in Alberta, they've actually kind of changed their tune. They're establishing a rural med school because why? It's becoming harder and harder to attract doctors to rural Canada. So maybe on that front alone, we can chase the province of Alberta. If you're so inclined, let's talk about it. All right, a couple of quickies before we get to you. So we've heard a lot, and we talk a lot about the fishery in this province. And of course, some people, if you're not directly involved, and you maybe roll your eyes at all the focus that's given to the fishery, and especially if you're, say, for instance, a townie or living on the Northeast Avalon, a reminder that St. John's is the biggest bay in the province, more seafood offloaded in the city of St. John's than any other harbour in Newfoundland and Labrador. But it's the commercial fishery designation that's been offered. And lots of consternation questions out there. So Minister Seamus O'Regan has rejected any calls for a reversal of the decision. But here's where I think there's a lack of understanding, including for yours truly. So the minister basically said you can't have your cake and eat it too, and made reference to the fact that we have NAFO obligations, which is absolutely true, but then goes on to say that, adding any additional tonnage to the northern cod fishery in the total allowable catch automatically triggers X, Y, and Z. My question would be, if we went from 13,000 to 18,000, does that automatically trigger additional NAFO obligations? I don't think so. Because is there not an ability, or what is the threshold inside the stewardship fishery? Is there an actual number of tons that triggers an automatic reversal of the moratorium to go to a commercial fishery versus a stewardship fishery? I'm not so sure that's the case. So if there's some information lacking that we can fill in some of these gaps, is there a threshold that automatically triggers a commercial fishery? And if it's 18,000 tons, that sounds pretty bizarre to me, given the fact that there's a 1982 agreement that was reiterated in 2015 regarding the first 115,000 tons to be associated directly with the inshore fishery. So the answers and the rationale are simply not adding up. Not for me, anyway. We'll hear from others that say a blended fishery that includes the offshore and the inshore is important for a successful and a viable, sustainable fishery. Okay. But the answer that says, well, there's an automatic trigger, I'm not so sure, because I tried to find something to back up that utterance, and I can't find it. So if you want to fill in my blanks here, we can do it. All right, a couple of very quick ones. And on that front, commercial fishery. The recreational fishery, the issue about how we are treated so much differently than the rest of Atlantic Canada and Quebec is a real thorn in the side of many. And I'm with you. It is a prickly situation. And again, when you look for answers or rationale for decision making, it's hard to come by. So, DFO sits on their hands month after month after week, and then finally announces the recreational food fishery dates. And of course, predictably, the exact same as they were last year, 39 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So that different treatment for this province versus the rest of the Maritimes, I think would be an interesting conversation. And some people, absolutely, maybe there's folks who go out and do it for a recreational purpose, but without question, there's people out there doing it to get some food. There's a great story in the media today regarding someone who was a new volunteer at a food bank. I believe it was out in Carbonear. And she said that she thought she understood the food insecurity problem, but she was amazed with just how prevalent it is. So she says she was pretty naive about what's actually happening on the ground. But the food bank story in this country is actually fascinating. It was a one-time Band-Aid solution. There was a bit of a bust in the oil industry that caused the first food bank in the country to open in 1981 in Edmonton. And again, it was supposed to be like a one-off, just to try to ease the burden of that bit of an oil bust at that moment in time. As of 1987, the Canada Food Bank community created the Canadian Association of Food Banks. So it went from one in Edmonton in 1981. Now there's almost 800 food banks in the country, 3,000 food programs available in Canada. And every time you go to the grocery store, you understand fully just how many people are forced to go to the food bank. How many Canadians are a missed paycheck away from having to do exactly that? So anyway, 1981, one, now a full reliance, and millions of Canadians relying on a food bank, which is desperate times. We are on Twitter, talk about desperate. We're VOCM Openline, follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show on this sunny Thursday here in the city of St. John's. That starts with Kevin, who wants to talk about Minister O'Regan's comments on the cod fishery, and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 7. Good morning, Kevin. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy. It's been a while, but I was listening to Seamus O'Regan's statement this morning. My God, I think we sent every kind of an idiot to Ottawa in the world, but why he took the cake this morning. A man to get on with that BS. Well, you can't have your cake and eating too. Listen here, we paid for our cake for the past 30 odd years here in this province. Probably $10 to $20 billion worth of stuff gone out of this province and out of the people in this province. We paid for the damn cake, and he's eating it. It's unreal. And then he talks about these obligations. My God, what is wrong? You know, what is wrong with this man? Is he senile or not? Probably.
No, he's not. But to be fair, and I don't know if anybody is an idiot or not, but the issue regarding NAFO obligations is very real, and that's been in place well before the Trudeau Liberals took power. But my question is, exactly what amount of tonnage for northern cod taken out of the water constitutes the triggering of lifting the moratorium and reinstating a commercial fishery? That's what I don't understand. So are they trying to tell us that an additional 5,000 tons automatically triggers a commercial fishery? I don't think so. That doesn't make any sense to me. And if someone can provide me the numbers that says if it's 18,000, 20,000, 25, whatever the case may be, that automatically triggers you moving from stewardship to commercial, I'd love to have the info because I can't find it.
You know, and you won't find it. And I think you said in the preamble there, and I was going to mention it as well, back in 1992, the 115,000 metric ton that was the quota was supposed to be before any of this stuff was bought into. No, but this man talks about obligations, right? Past obligation. What happened to the obligations he had to the people of his district, to the people of Newfoundland, to the people of Atlantic Canada? You know, I mean, we have to put obligations where they belong, and he's certainly not doing it. He's a long way. He don't have a clue what an obligation is, to be completely honest with you. You know, it's sickening to hear these people talking like that. You know, they don't have a clue. I mean, I was here in '92 when Minister Crosby said the GD, we didn't take the GD Fisher, but he bloody well did. Him and his cronies did take it out. I mean, how do you go from over 200,000 metric ton of attack in 1991 to a zero fish in the water in '92? Someone had to take responsibility for not doing the science, not placing the attack rate. I mean, and it was his office. You know, we've been putting up with this forever and a day. Each and every Newfoundlander has been crucified by the federal government and bartering away our cod stocks and minerals and everything else, for the sake of a few votes or corporate greed. You know, it's totally ridiculous what's going on in this province now. Now, this man should resign. I got to be completely honest with you. And when it comes to an election, whenever the Liberal Party in this province, if they keep statements like this, they shouldn't get enough of votes to hang on to party status. You know, that's how bad it is. These people are totally ridiculous, and they don't care one iota about the province of Newfoundland. That's how simple it is, and it's always been the same, you know. And our brother Trudeau up there, wonderful. I can remember back when his father was there too, and at the time I had to go to work in Ontario, and when he'd be taking a tour of Canada, he'd started in Halifax. He didn't even know Newfoundland existed, and this fella wouldn't know Newfoundland existed today either if it wasn't for a few poultry votes, and that's the only reason is around here. No, it's shame on the Liberals in this province and the members here. I mean, you know, it's no wonder that Kevin McDonald and fellows like that that tried to stand up for the people of the province are leaving and getting out. You know, it's totally ridiculous, to say the least.
Well,
we put up with this.
There's a lot to what you just said there. So you talk about 1992 when the science wasn't done. The fact of the matter is that there's been an absence of some of the forecasted science recently. And back in 1992, it wasn't the fact that there wasn't science completed. It was ignored. There was warnings for years over years regarding the draggers and the offshore fleets and foreign overfishing. And you're right, the quota was well in excess of 200,000 tons in the late 80s, but the science was ignored. And that's some of the questions people have now is, does the science actually constitute this sort of move on northern cod? Now, many people who are in the industry talk about catch rates and what they see in the bays. Fair enough. I'm not on the water, so I can't speak with any authority on that front. But let me just throw this out there, see what you think. So whether or not, and I don't think it's true that members don't care about the province, I think the issue is the number. I mean, with 7 seats only, we have very little clout. I mean, that's just the unfortunate fact of the matter. Regardless if we had 7 Liberals, 7 Tories, 7 NDP, 7 Independents, 7 Greens, 7 Marijuana Party members, we just don't carry a whole lot of weight inside Parliament. At this moment in time, there's 338 seats, 7 of which represent Newfoundland and Labrador, which puts us on the back foot regardless of party. What do you think?
Yes, Paddy, and that's true. That's true to a point. But in a minority government such as we have now, those 7 seats are very important, and they're very important to the government. I listened to on your show the other day, Tony Doyle, and he was talking about fish. That's a man that probably the first pair of boots he put on his life was a pair of knee rubbers. He was in a boat. I'd say he was fishing before he was 10 years old, and these are people that know this fishery. And they know what to do with the fishery, and they know how it was crucified by all fleets. But it wasn't, it wasn't foreign fleets that destroyed the fishery in Newfoundland. It was the government of Canada letting them do it. I mean, there was no such thing as quotas, even if it was had at 200,000 ton. It was always overfished. And you tell me that a foreign fleet is coming to Newfoundland for 100,000 ton of fish? Now, let's get real. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's a simple thing.
Foreign fleets have been out there during the moratorium. They're tiptoeing around the 200-mile limit ever since 1992 and prior. The Faroese are out there, the Russians are out there, the Portuguese are out there, the Japanese are out there. Lots of foreign fishing continued throughout the moratorium.
Oh, yes, I know that. But then again, we had a fellow, what the hell was his name? Tobin, yes, that fellow Brian. And we had one of the biggest demonstrations ever in the water. We were going to take over the nose and tail of the Grand Bank, and we were going to make this stock ours and all this BS. I mean, this is the BS we get from the federal government. And it's as simple as that, It's time, like Greg Petty was saying, well, there's going to be demonstrations, but there shouldn't be just the people, the fish harbours of this province that demonstrate. It should be all the people. Come on, let's get real. We get a few poultry weekends out to jig cod for substance for our families, and God knows there's a lot of families in Newfoundland that could use a few codfish. And that's as simple as that. I mean, when I was at it and stuff like that, I knew who needed the fish in the area and stuff like that, and I gave it to them. It come at no cost. But there's a hell of a lot of people that can't afford to get out these days, and if they do get out, they only can get out once. They can't afford it. But the federal government is going to give 1,000 ton to foreign fleets while we starve in Newfoundland. There's something drastically wrong here, Paddy.
Yeah, and the problem there extends well beyond the current government, though. That's how people refer to the fact that fishery has been used as a diplomatic trading tool. And the percentage of various species of quota that goes to international fleets is pretty staggering. We don't factor that into the conversation very often. So that's the problem here, is the technicalities associated with calling it a commercial fishery. It automatically triggers NAFO obligations. And that's not this government or the past government's fault. This is a long time ago that some of these NAFO agreements, and just remember, NAFO, which has so much actual authority in the world of the fishery, is got their headquarters in Spain. It's just like the Ottawa trying to run the Newfoundland Labrador fishery from Kent Street, Ottawa, and we've got to accommodate obligations for NAFO, and their office, I think, is in Barcelona. Some of it's head scratching.
Yeah, it's unreal, Paddy. Like I say, I hear you say a few times you can't get your mind around it, and I tell you, I can't hear anybody could possibly get their mind around this, because like I said before, it wasn't the fleets that destroyed the fish. It was the government of Canada giving it away, and it wasn't just this government that we had, the present day government, but all the governments in the past, because we were only an instrument for something else that they wanted. What a way for you would say the fatherland to treat one of their children, and basically that's what it is. They treat us like crap, and then they come down and look for a few votes when it's time to do it. It's unbelievable, with the amount of fisheries and all the other different industries and different ores and everything else in this province. We should all be on easy street, not worrying about trying to put food in the food bank. It's totally ridiculous.
If we're being honest, the status of our fishery changed in 1949. period. It was probably, we talk about giveaways of minerals and the relationship to the federal government with the oil industry or what have you, but in reality, the biggest giveaway, the largest implication, industrially speaking, regarding Confederation is the fishery. That, giving over so much control of that industry to Ottawa has been a problem ever since 49, and it got demonstrably worse through the 70s in particular, but you're not wrong in knowing that the different implications of how the moratorium came to pass, it was a combination of everything. You're right. It was the diplomatic trading tool that was fish. It was the inshore and the offshore and the draggers and the factory freezer trawlers and international fishing. It was all of those things. And every red flag was ignored until it came time to have to shut it down in full. Kevin, appreciate your call this morning. Thanks for doing it.
Yes, thanks for letting me on there, Paddy. I
Anytime.
appreciate it too.
All the
Thank you.
best. Bye-bye. And look, it doesn't matter exactly what party you're in favour of. I mean, just look what's happening today in Britain. They're going to the polls. And it looks like, very clearly, Labour is going to clean the Conservatives' clock. They've been in power for some 14 years, and they've brought a collection of real misfits and some weirdos to be the Prime Minister of Britain. And because of it, like this Labour leader, Keir Starmer, he doesn't stand for anything. I mean, he's not talking public policy, period. He's going to be swept into power. Why? Because people are sick of looking at the party that's currently in power. And it looks very, very similar in this country. The polls say it anyway. And I mean, you can take the polls with a grain of salt, or you can put all the stock into the polls. But parties have best before dates. And you hear all these leaks coming out of the Liberal caucus. And look, you may indeed be fully intending on voting for the Conservatives or whoever as opposed to the Liberals, but the fact of the matter is we're just talking about optics of politics and best before dates and personalities and people sick of one person or another, in particular Justin Trudeau. But we really don't have any idea exactly what's coming down the pike in opposition to what we currently are dealing with. And you may hate the Trudeau Liberals. Absolutely fair enough. If that's how you feel, so be it. It's your vote. You get to make your own decisions. But just like in Britain, we find ourselves in a place where all we're really doing is arguing about politics, not so much about policy. Policy be damned. I mean, that's the boring work, right? Politics now is some sort of high-profile, celebrity status, glamorous kind of issue, as opposed to the real grunt work that is the actual essence of public policy. Getting in the office with your senior staff, creating policy that makes sense, not about trying to curry favor every single time with a photo opportunity and a glossy announcement and playing the celebrity game, which is what politics has become. It is no longer about people, nameless, faceless, doing the hard work, making sure that public policy is rolled out, detailed, cohesive, comprehensive, because just look no further than the dental care program or the pharmacare program. All in high level, at 100,000 feet above sea level, it sounds good. It can benefit millions of Canadians. But then we find out in short order that after these big announcements, not all the I's are dotted, not all the T's are crossed. Why? Because it was in an effort to get on Cochrane's show or Rosie Barton's show or this show with some snippet from your press conference, the photo opportunities. We would collectively be all better off, regardless of the party you support, if politics became more boring than the current state of affairs here. Because it's not about sound bites. That's long been the case. Putting cameras in the House of Commons, putting cameras in the legislature has led us down this path. The brain dead banging on desks to some absolutely juvenile remarks has been all the rage, as opposed to committee work, getting the things done and getting them done right. Let's take a break. Press the button. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Darryl, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Paddy. How are you today?
Not too bad, you?
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Paddy, what I'm calling about a situation where you got all these human remains stored in freezer units or whatever you want to call them, and it's still ongoing and not resolved and probably getting worse. And I think it's costing in excess of, $200,000 or more? I stand to be corrected on that.
It's hundreds of thousands, yeah.
Well, so wouldn't it be cheaper if they went and had a burial for all these people?
Yeah, likely.
I know some are probably unknown, or like families. I'm hearing different things. Families are not claiming because of financial reasons, or just not being claimed at all. But regardless of what situation is, I mean, why don't you just give them a burial? either cremation or something, it'd be a lot cheaper, and you spend thousands of dollars, and they're just being stored there, and no time limit to it. It's just ongoing. It just don't make sense. They got lots of money to spend on advertising, $171,000 for that stuff. So can we put that money towards the people and show a bit of respect towards the people that have passed away?
Yeah, short answer is yes.
And their families, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things here. So even for folks who can avail of the $2,338 from the province or the CPP death benefit of $2,500, neither of which have changed upwards in quite a long time, the process to even fill out the application form is pretty onerous. To make it a little bit simpler may indeed make more people say, okay, well, if it's easy enough to access those funds, I will indeed make the application. I will indeed get the money. I will claim the body, and Bob's your uncle. And you're not wrong. With the amount of money we're spending to have these bodies in these units, and all the money it costs to buy all the particular hydraulic lifts and whatever these rollers are, I don't know because I have nothing to do with it. But if we add it all up, there's probably a cost savings. There's probably more dignified end of life for folks whose families are not claiming the bodies. Plus, if there's been instances where people have availed of the money and they pocketed it as opposed to collect their lost loved one and actually provide for a funeral or a cremation, if that's the case, let's just make a direct relationship with the funeral homes. Give it, say, 30 days. If the body remains unclaimed and the next of kin have been notified and no one comes forward, then we do the right thing and we just provide the adequate funding, strike a deal with the funeral home providers here, and just change the course of action. Because right now it does have a distinct feeling and a flair of out of sight, out of mind. So just moving the reefers from the alley behind the health sciences to the underground parking garage and pulling up a wall so people can't see it hasn't changed anything. It's just cost us more money.
Yeah, I know it's crazy, and I totally agree what you're saying. And but now you look at that CPP, you get whatever it is, $2,500, but that's taxed as well. So taxes comes off that. So you could probably put that down to probably about $1,500.
Yeah, I mean, tax on funeral services is another part of the conversation, I suppose, sure. Yeah,
and but even the CPP, if you get money for a funeral for CPP, if it's $2,500, that's taxable. You're taxed on that.
You're taxed on the funeral benefits?
Yeah, for CPP. Yeah, you get, I think it's $2,500. That's taxable.
Okay.
So that $2,500 could translate. You only get, I don't know, $1,800, say, or whatever it is off the top of my head. You know what I'm saying? Unless they changed it, but it is taxed. And you can look into it yourself. Feel free to look into it yourself. But unless it changed, but it is taxable. And I don't agree with that because, I mean, the CPP, like you or anyone else, we pay into it, is your money, but yet you're being taxed on your own money.
Well, sure. I mean, all CPP pensions are taxable, and I just very quickly bopped it up here. It says the Canada Pension Plan death benefit is one-time lump sum payment on behalf of an eligible CPP contributor. All CPP pensions and benefits are taxable.
Exactly. So there you go. So you get $2,500 for the funeral, then tax comes off that.
Right.
And I don't agree with none of that because you look at it, even though it's all taxable, and that's our system. But when you look at it, you paying CPP, I did. Everybody pays into it. Is your money. But when you go to draw on your money, you're being taxed on your own money.
Well, you pay taxes on it. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying. It's your money. It's not the government giving you the money. It's your money you put into it. But yet, then when you go to get it, you're being taxed on your own money. You put something wrong.
Well, that's like most things in this world, unless you have a registered plan. But it's not all my contribution either. Let's say I get co-funded CPP contributions. But
right.
I appreciate the time, Darrell. Thanks for the call this morning.
All right. Again, thanks, Patty. And I hope you get like the Minister of Health come on your show. And look at like what we just discussed. I mean, give a bit of respect and dignity to the people, either young or old, whatever the case may be. I mean, everybody's all taxpayers, and like I said, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars are being exported out of the province. Let's please look after our own.
Appreciate the time.
All right, thanks, Patty. All the best to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care. Right-o. Bye.
And Aaron chimes in, and he's not wrong, and I get the point. He says, if you don't have the money to pay for a funeral, your average tax rate would be pretty low. Fair enough, but when we talk about who belongs in the working poor class, what constitutes poverty, and who's in the middle class, and those types of things, that's been very much a moving target over the recent past. I know people who were not really worried every second Friday about being able to pay the bills and not worried walking into the grocery store and not worried pulled up to the gas pump. But that's changed. So if you felt like, you weren't a paycheck to paycheck necessarily family 5 years ago, a lot of those families are not in that bracket any longer. So I get Aaron's point, but the situation and the water on those beans has changed dramatically. Let's take a break, okay? When we come back, so we had a chat yesterday with Eddie Sincourt, who's the co-chair external for St. John's Pride, and talking about, excluding any uniformed law enforcement officers and what have you, and the parade being led by the Palestinian Action YYT group. And consequently, it actually cost them a sponsor. Harvey's Oil is no longer sponsoring the Pride on the Pier to the tune of some $15,000, I believe I heard from Chris Ford this morning. And then you hear from student groups at Memorial University. They've been protesting for some 45 days, and they're talking about the university's need to divest in any companies that have any association with Israel and what's happening in Gaza. So Sadie's in the queue. She's from MUN student, that particular student group at Memorial University. Connie's in the queue to talk about the June court numbers. She's, of course, Connie Pike from Miles for Smiles. Noah wants to talk about the food fishery, and then we'll speak to you on a topic of your choosing. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Sadie. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you today?
Okay, thanks. How about you?
Good. I was looking to talk to you a little bit today about some abuses of power and violation of Board of Regent policy that we've had from the chair of the board, Glenn Barnes. So as you mentioned, I'm with MUN Students for Palestine. So we have a campaign, and I just want to correct you on one thing there. You mentioned that we're calling for divestment from all entities tied to Israel. We're actually looking for divestment from companies tied to human rights violations, including those which are complicit in the genocide in Palestine. So, for example, MUN recently disclosed that they have over $7 million invested in companies that are basically complicit with genocide. So mostly it's weapons manufacturers that we're looking at right now. So it's not just baseline any Israeli company. It's mostly weapons manufacturers or things with human rights.
But you've also included companies that don't provide any offensive material to Israel.
Well, if they're linked to illegal settlements, so for example, Motorola provides surveillance technology. So technically, that's not a weapon, but it's still contributing to the genocide. But listen, what I wanted to tell you about was that we had a click-to-email campaign to the Board of Regents to allow community members and students to get involved and let the Board of Regents know that they wanted divestment from egregious human rights abuses, because we don't think the school should be invested in that. And so what it was there's a template email that called for divestment from these companies. And now some community members received encouraging messages thanking them for bringing these issues to their attention. However, people were shocked by the unprofessional response by the chair of the board, Glenn Barnes. So he actually forwarded emails to the parents of students that he recognized. And so he was targeting individuals that he recognized. And that is a huge breach of privacy because he was forwarding emails that he received in his role as the chair of the Board of Regents to third parties. So he was sending angry emails to parents at 4 a.m. And I just don't think that behavior is reflective of like a competent professional who's equipped to deal with these issues. And when one of the parents replied and said, you need to speak with my daughter about this, and who's a fully grown adult with kids of their own, he doubled down and sent more emails. And so this does violate Board of Regent policy into different sections that we can immediately identify. So he's not being respectful, and he's also in clear violation of their privacy policy.
Fair enough. That's the first I've heard of it. But even just to break it down, so I read a story in the Muse about this exact issue, and it turns out that the investment portfolio includes 0.297% of the total portfolio and the boycott was provided by your organization. So pretty paltry number. Then there's one company in particular, though, that I think jumps off the page. That's Textron. People will probably be familiar with them when they were known as Raytheon, and they have been one of the more powerful weapons provision companies in the world for quite a long time. So that one does indeed jump off the page. But when
Sure.
you talk about, and I mean, it goes on to say some of the commitments that Memorial University has agreed to: disclosure direct investments, review the investment policy, require external investment firms to sign on to MUN's principles of the UN principles of responsible investing, work with the organization to publish a statement for peace, establish bursaries and supports for Palestinian students, waive application fees for Palestinian students for 24-25. So it seems to me that your organization has some pretty significant success, because this is a distinct change in tune. We talk about what you heard from Dr. Neil Bowes not that long ago, when we heard a statement from the Board of Regents where they were pretty much rejecting a lot of your calls. Now they seem to be answering all of them.
They are not answering our calls. So where you've mentioned with the divestment thing, they're going to review their policies and they have their managers sign on to the UN principles for responsible investing. They've already said all of that, and yet they still have millions of dollars that are invested in weapons manufacturers that are currently providing weapons to Israel that are being used to murder people. So these are the same. They're just repeating policies that they already have in place, which are clearly ineffective if these things are still going on. And for the disclosure, they did say they were going to also tell us about their indirect investments, which they haven't actually provided a monetary number for. And I mean, they're not working with us, and it's unacceptable.
If they're not using any tuition dollars for any of the investment portfolio that you're referring to, why do you think that gives students the right to demand anything if your tuition and fees are not being used?
Well, first of all, for the $7 million, you're correct, but there is additional money in endowment and non-endowment funds. But we also have a petition happening right now for pension holders to call for divestment, and we do have people signing on to that. So it's not just students who are calling for this. We have union members involved. We have the faculty involved. And at any rate, we're all linked to this institution. And for every single day that it continues to have investments in weapons manufacturers, regardless of, what portfolio it's coming from at the university, every day that continues, we are linked to the murder of thousands of people. And that's just not something that I think any of us should be okay with continuing.
You will inevitably be tagged, just like all of the protests across the country that call themselves pro-Palestinian. The conversation kind of gets derailed before it starts oftentimes on a matter of public policy, regardless of what we're talking about. So if someone says to you, Sadie, why are you pro-Hamas? And I'm not suggesting you are, but that's how these conversations have taken place right across the country, and specifically on university campuses, whether it be at McGill or University of Toronto, which is in the headlines again this morning. So someone will say, Sadie, you and your organization are pro-Hamas. How do you react?
Well, what I would say to that is that I don't have any evidence that our university is providing weapons to Hamas, but I do have evidence that they're funding companies which are providing weapons to Israel. We're calling for complete divestment from all weapons manufacturers. So regardless of where those weapons are going, we don't think our school should be invested in violence. And I mean, if you can get me the list that says MUN is sending money to Hamas, then that's something we can talk about. But we have direct evidence that they are invested in companies providing weapons to Israel, and we don't want them providing weapons to anyone.
And if that's the case, if a Mount Pearl-based company that provides underwater robotics, which has nothing to do with offensive capacity in Israel, why do they belong on the list then, if that's the case, as you just stated?
I think that we both know it's not true, that they have nothing to do with offensive capability. They're used for other things. They're used to attach to weapons, drones, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't say that it's not affiliated with that at all. So I just think that's a fallacy.
Well, I mean, you just asked me to prove something of which I have no interest in proving, but is that something you can also prove?
I think that we could come back to that for sure. I think if you look online, there's plenty of resources that would help you with that. But I think that what we want to talk about is the blatant violations of policy by Chair of the Board of Regents, Glenn Barnes.
Understood. And that's an important part of this conversation that kind of got lost. My apologies on that front. But I will follow up on that issue because that is not necessarily the role of anybody in a position of leadership, whether it be at the Board of Regents or Neil Bowes' office or anyone else. So I will follow that one because that one, it came as news to me this morning. That's the first I'd ever heard of it.
This is something we're just releasing now. There will definitely be news to come about this. And we wanted you to be the first to know.
Well, I'm glad you let me know, and I'm sure the newsroom has heard it and will chase the same, and I'll do exactly that. I'll invite Mr. Barnes on the programme to ask him directly as to why and what he was hoping would be the outcome here, because you're right. We're talking about adults. If my children were part of one protest or another, that's between me and my sons, as opposed to someone writing me an email in the middle of the night or calling me and saying, hey, did you know what your adult is doing? I mean, unless they're breaking a law, then of course I want to be informed, but if it's simply taking a stance, and regardless of the issue or the topic or the timing, then I'm happy enough to have the conversation with my own family as opposed to have someone quote unquote rat me out.
Now we're under the impression right now there could be additional issues surrounding conflict of interest because Glenn Barnes is involved with his architecture company is part of a larger company, WSP, and Mon is invested in that, which initially seemed like a conflict of interest. And number two, WSP has been brought to the UN before to be put on the list of companies complicit with the genocide, so that is another angle that we're looking to pursue further, but we need to get a little bit more information, and then we'll be able to tell you more.
Appreciate the time, Sadie. Thanks for the call.
Yeah. Can I just add, if any community members think that this is an egregious violation of the policy and an abuse of power, they can contact the Executive Director of the Board of Regents, Lisa R. at mon.ca, and let them know that they think that he shouldn't be behaving like that.
I appreciate the time. We'll follow up.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, we're getting pretty close. Do you want me to take Noah before we get to the newscast, David? Yeah, I'm going to take another one here quick. Let's go to line number one. Noah, you're on the air.
Hello, sir. How you doing?
Doing great. You?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm just going to pull over there now because you knows what the service is like over the province. It's a bit spotty. Anyway, Patty, I just wanted to call there now, ask you a couple questions. I'm not going to call it laziness, but I just haven't had a chance to look into it yet. But I was speaking to my father the other day about the food fishery, and he was telling me that in the Maritimes, they can fish. Is it true, or have you heard they can fish every day of the week for codfish?
Now, there's different rules in different areas, like on the Magdalen Islands versus, say, off the coast of New Brunswick, what have you. But by and large, that's an accurate statement. There's a distinct disparity here. We are Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 39 days. It's a longer season, and it's every day of the week in other parts of it, the Maritimes in particular, and Quebec. That's true. Not every single area, but for the most part.
Yeah, and for me, just to try to wrap my head around that, I mean, like, you know, Newfoundlander, born and raised, but moved away for a while. And, I mean, one of the reasons why I came home was for the freedoms that we have here for outdoors life. And how does it make any sense that people in the Maritimes can fish for codfish every day, but if I want to go off the rocks of Flat Rock with my rod and try to jig a few fish for supper on a Wednesday evening, I can't do that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I think it's unfair. I mean, there's lots of fairness issues that I think when you have, you know, and let's, again, a lot of this, well, it's not one simple answer to it, but when there was a moratorium, of course, there'd be a hyper-focus on every cod taken out of the water, whether it be in a gill net by a dragger or on my cod jigger. Then you add to the fact that we have so little clout. It's just true. I mean, if you talk about just 7 seats compared to Quebec with, what is it, they have 86 or something, there's a reason why different provinces get treated differently, because it's a political calculation. I mean, basically, with the supply and confidence agreement between the Liberals and NDP, we could do away with the 6 seats here, and they'd still have the power. So we just have a problem here with not having a cohesive voice representing the entirety of Atlantic Canada, which would bring us a little bit more clout, even though that still would only add up to, I think, it's 31 or 32 seats. So I think that's a big part of the problem, regardless of the party in power.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, it makes no sense because it is a federal regulation where we're getting controlled, or we're getting our freedoms and our rights taken away from a federal level, and we have to respond to it now on a provincial level. But, I mean, like, equality across at least Atlantic Canada for the fishery, and you're talking about 5 fish, and I haven't run the numbers. I don't know if you've come across the numbers, but we talk about the tonnage and them taking away the moratorium now. Like, I wonder, has anybody run the numbers for the common man and calculate that up on a cumulative basis? How many tons of fish are Newfoundlanders taking out of the water a season for food for us to eat and provide for our families?
We don't know. And that, you know, nobody wants to have to fill out a logbook or have the tag system in place. But unless we do something for even just one season to get a number to work from, then we're going to be guessing. I'll hear one group say it's 2,200 tons. I'll hear someone else tell me it's 1% of the total allowable catch compared to the commercial harvest. We don't know. People are taking guesses. And consequently, we're just going to be spinning our wheels and, letting one anecdotal piece of evidence rule the day when, in fact, anecdotal evidence is fairly flimsy for the most part.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat a dead cat there, but at the same time, with statistics and the methods that we have, with a simple survey run over different parts of the province, I'm sure we could get a population number high enough to be able to make some assumptions and say, we have this many fishermen in this area of the province who are catching on average these many fish. The impact that we have to the overall fishery is insignificant, and you know what? Just the inconsistencies across Atlantic Canada and the fact that I can't fish on a Tuesday, but in 4 days' time I can fish, I find that pretty ridiculous.
I agree. And it all depends on whether or not the weather's conducive. So inside 39 days, inevitably we're going to lose a few to weather. And if you're a rotation worker or you're someone who actually works weekends. So it's not fair. It doesn't make much sense. Add to it that we have to wait until the 11th hour to simply be told, oh, you wanted to know the dates? Oh, they're same as last year. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. No, it is ridiculous. And just my last point on that, or my last question, I should say, is I'm not sure how many people, I do listen to the show when I can, but I'm not sure how many people have raised that point. And have you heard of this point being brought up in a political conversation? I don't stay too in tune with the members of Parliament and all that stuff, but have you heard this conversation being had at a higher level? And is anybody speaking with any sort of, I don't want to call it outrage, but concern at the lack of equality with regards to the food fishery in Newfoundland?
Yes. There was a petition circulating. Can't remember the total number of signatures it garnered, somewhere in the thousands, and it was tabled in the House of Commons by Clifford Small, who's the CPC member for Central Coast Bays Notre Dame. It made very little in the way of waves, got very little traction, obviously, because nothing changed this year. They were looking for extensive sweeping changes to extend the number of days, of the week that you're allowed to fish, but nothing changed. But yes, I guess the answer to your question is yes, it made its way to Parliament.
Right on. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to talk about there, Patty, is more of a concern there, closer to my heart, but I did water resources engineering, and I have a Facebook group. It's called the Newfoundland and Labrador Water Coalition. I don't have a whole lot of members yet, but I'm really passionate about providing clean water to Newfoundlanders and sort of dedicated my life towards it now. I just wanted to raise some attention to the state of our water infrastructure in Newfoundland and Labrador and encourage people to make their way to that Facebook group. 1/3 of the provinces is on boil water advisories at any given point, and about 90% of our wastewater goes untreated to the natural environment. So, if there are any concerns with an individual within their community, I'd encourage them to seek me out and post some pictures, because on a federal level, once again, we need to draw more attention to just how bad our water infrastructure is.
I'd love for you to call back another day, take that on a bit more extensively. And you're right, all of that wastewater that goes untreated is in contravention of federal standards, which is also a problem that no one talks about. No, give us a call again on that issue.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Right on, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Connie Pike. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hello there.
Oh, hi, Connie. Great day out there.
So far, so good.
Happy July 4th to all my family and friends in our neighboring country. Patty, I wanted to give you the numbers, the court docket numbers on child abuse cases for June of this year. And that month we were up to 346 cases by 74 offenders. The caveat I always like to use and remind people of, though, is that it's important to remember less than 10% of cases ever get reported, and even a smaller number than that go to court. So 346 on the docket, you're likely looking at over 4,000 cases if, they were all reported and all went to court. And that's too much. One's too much, in my opinion, but that's certainly too much in a province our size. And the closeness we're touted to have and all that. It's just, well, there's no other word for it. It's criminal. I wanted to kind of reiterate too, as parents, it's our job, it's our responsibility to provide the guidance and direction and supervision for children to help keep them safe. I mean, we need to have conversations with children that are uncomfortable. Nobody really wants to have them. I hope that at some point they wouldn't even be necessary, but we're in a place and time now where we really need to talk to our children. And children, they're not always sure what they should tell their parents. So therefore, it's up to us to tell them what they can talk about to us, the good and the bad things. And if children are in situations or if they're online and they come across information, anything that makes them feel weird or uncomfortable or is inappropriate or feels icky to them, depending on the age of your child and the language you feel comfortable using, they have to know that they can come to you. Remind them they can come to you and they can tell you anything. But if you're not having these conversations with them, then they feel it's something they have to keep a secret from you. That's the whole point there, right? You let them know that they won't be in trouble, like coming to you is the right thing to do. And we don't have enough of that going on. Education amongst all age groups, I guess, is lacking. And, of course, Miles for Smiles with our push to get the body safety program into schools. We're hoping that in September of 2025 we'll start to see some turnaround, but that's another possibly 2 to 3 years before we see any impact at all. So I'm hoping that parents will take it upon themselves to develop those healthy safety habits and talk to their children. It's kind of ironic. One of the first things we teach our little ones, and they're only toddlers when we say this, we'll take their hand and we'll go to the street intersection and we'll say, look both ways before you cross the street. We give them that basic information when they're 2 or 3 years old, just after they start walking. And what we need to do then is say, here are some other things that could keep you safe. Like, it's a good time to have conversations with children when they're verbal, when they know what you're saying to them, when they can understand it, and you use terms appropriate for their age. But it's never too young to start, Patty. And one of the best ways that I could encourage and urge parents, grandparents to talk to their little ones is to use the correct names for body parts. In 30 years of policing, I heard a lot of weird, silly, inappropriate names. And so if children believe that a part of their body is something bad to talk about, then they're not really going to understand that something bad may be happening to them. They kind of equate the two, like it's bad, and they keep it a secret. They're told to keep things a secret, and they keep it a secret. So it's up to us, really, to do the common sense things, use the correct names, tell them not all secrets are good, tell them to talk to someone if someone makes them feel icky. All of these things can be done at a very, very young age.
Absolutely. I think it gets even further complicated online, because when we talk about sextortion, it can start very so-called innocently and gradually arrives at a place of evil. And before long, the child feels probably like they've played an active role in their own problem. And so consequently, it's that concept of, oh my God, this is my fault, and I don't want to go to my mother and father because I'm going to be in trouble. When the message is obviously quite clear, and your analogy of look both ways before you cross the street is pretty fundamental, associated with a lot of things. And the red flags and the little burst of worry or a pang of worry in your belly, when it happens, you can only hope that those conversations have happened between the parents and their children. If my kids feel like they're in trouble, even if they played some role in their position of trouble, I'm there to help. That's what I'm there for. You know, not only to provide supper on the table and a roof over your head and a bike to ride, I'm also there to try to dig you out of any problem, whether or not you played an active role or not. So your message is right. And some of these conversations go unhad because, you know, some of them are tricky. To talk about the birds and the bees and to talk about sex and talk about the predators are out there, sometimes people just have a hard time trying to find the right words. And, you know, even things like using appropriate words for body parts, it's not your wee-wee, right? It's something else. And you can choose your own word inside your own family. But it's just hard to broach some of those conversations when, in fact, they're probably the most important conversations you'll ever have. You know, be nice to everyone at school, those types of things. They're easy, right? They're all sometimes feel like throwaway conversations, but those things about protecting yourself and self-respect and being aware of the dangers around you, I know it's a traumatic issue, but if you don't broach it, the next time you have the conversation might be with law enforcement.
Well, that's exactly right. You hit on all the right points. I mean, we grew up in a time where our parents didn't talk to us about these private things either, right? It was real taboo to say these words out loud and to have these kinds of conversations. But I like to think in 2024, with all the resources that are out there, you know, for parents to show that concern for their children and to find these resources, first of all, to educate themselves. If they're not comfortable having this conversation, there are so many places that they can check and find the right ways to approach it. Like I said, if it comes from a safety perspective, I want to keep you safe. You know, you look both ways before you cross the street, and when something makes you feel uncomfortable, you come to someone that you trust, mom, dad, a friend, a grandparent, no matter who it is, and reassure them that you're not going to be mad. And you're so right. I mean, in terms of online, that ramps everything up several notches. But the dynamics are the same, Patty, whether it's you're having a conversation with the child in person or somebody else is having it with them online. You know, there's grooming that happens. And these children are groomed. And then when they breach that secret they've been told to keep, then they start to feel guilty, which is often why the guilt comes in before they reveal oftentimes. So sometimes the guilt can keep them from coming to you because they don't know how you're going to react. And children are very perceptive that way. They can hear it in your tone. They can see it in your face. They watch your body language. If this is the first time they're hearing something uncomfortable like this coming from you, how will you react? You have to arm yourself, and yet, more importantly, you have to arm your children. I've always said for like 50 years now, I've said information is like a suit of armor, and if you can give that information to your child and help protect them, why wouldn't you?
For sure. Connie, I appreciate the time. I got to get to the break, but I appreciate your time as usual.
Thank you, Patty.
Have a great day. You too, Connie. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, conversation about the unclaimed bodies at the Health Sciences Centre. Boy, oh boy, don't go away. Welcome back to the programme. Let's go to line number 5. Say good morning to the NDP member for St. John Centre. He's the leader of the party. That's Jim Dinn. Good morning, Jim. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for having me on. I was going to be talking about some solutions, I guess, to the issue of the accumulation of bodies at the health sciences, but I think you covered many of them already in a previous conversation, and which I think in many ways should have been pretty academic and pretty clear as to what government could have done. Whether that was, first of all, I would say having a conversation with the funeral homes. They've been trying to have deal with this for, I would say, years. If I was talking to some funeral home directors, it's been over 10 years or more that they've been trying to get government to come to the table and to discuss the issue. About simplifying the process, if indeed the process is complicated. And I've seen the application for this. It is significantly complicated, especially for people who are going through, well, a period of grief at the loss of a loved one. And if it comes down to, and I don't think this is a major problem, that an inability to address or to find and locate next of kin, then there's got to be some way legislatively of allowing bodies to be disposed of in a respectful manner, with other than freezing them. And let me be clear: moving them off from freezers on a loading dock to freezer units in a basement is not respectful either way. And putting them in the basement is not any more respectful than where they were. To me, a respectful approach would have been to try to resolve this issue, and starting with the funeral home, starting with families. It's amazing to me, I guess, and that this story broke back in March. It came to my attention back in 2021, when I had funeral homes and a cemetery who basically were basically left holding the bag. Government was not paying out the funeral expenses. At that time, they said there seemed to be a willingness to move forward, and yet here we are, 3-4 years later, and the problem has been addressed. And since March, in that meantime, which should have been productive use, a good time to actually work something out with the funeral homes. I spoke to a funeral home director only 2 days ago, said there's been no progress, none of this promised conversation has occurred. And I'm thinking what they have spent their time on is, well, how do we? The only way I can describe this, Patty, is how do we hide the problem, so that it's away from public and media scrutiny, and I guess out of sight, out of mind. I think if government has money to, and the health authority has money to build a new underground facility, then for sure it has to have some way of addressing this financially for especially for families who can't afford it.
Sure, there's no one simple ideal resolution to this issue, and I mean I know this is the furthest thing from perfect, but even just the biblical concept of Potter's Field, unknown, unclaimed, indigent bodies, if they're not claimed, we bury them, and it wouldn't come with the funeral home associated cost. So again, that's not perfect, but it's something that's done almost everywhere in the modernized and the third and developing world. So maybe that's something that we can entertain, and that doesn't require a relationship necessarily with the funeral home. But whether we broach any of these potential solutions, every single one of them are probably better ideas than what we're currently doing.
Oh, for sure. Look, we filed an ATIP, an access to information, at the in March, because we really, the government had said, well, ministers said, well, they weren't aware of the problem. Then they said, well, they were aware of the problem, but they weren't aware where they're being stored. We think that there's been the funeral homes have been reaching out and trying to resolve this for a lot longer, and we haven't gotten the ATIP back. They've either there's a tremendous amount of information, or there's an attempt to hide the information. I don't know what the reason is anymore, but I think right now, to me, this is the solution that they've come up with is not more respectful, not more dignified. It is not a solution. And as if it comes down to a field, like you said, something a little bit more respectful. But having bodies in storage, I think some of them are in there for over 2 years. That is not. I don't know. I guess I would. I looked at if I had a loved one, I would not want to have a loved one in storage like that for 2 years. I think I would like to look for something a little bit more dignified at that, and what we consider dignified in our society. But freezing them is not the solution, and building a bigger and so-called better storage facility is not the solution.
No, and when I made mention of Potter's Field and said a biblical origin, immediately someone said, what are you talking about? It has nothing to do with the Bible. Well, as a matter of fact, it kind of does. Potter's Field comes from Matthew. I don't know what part of Matthew, the book of Matthew, but it's referring to the fact that people would go to the field and the potters would dig for clay, and consequently there'd be all kinds of trenches and holes for the burials of strangers. So that's the origin. That's what I meant by biblical. And I know that has nothing to do with what we're talking about necessarily, but something better than what we're currently currently doing, it seems to be there. And sometimes, governments will make these types of decisions, spend this type of money, and are loath to go back and admit, well, maybe there's something better we can do. We can refocus or refunnel this money for a better outcome for these bodies that go unclaimed. I know it feels like if you admit that you've taken a misstep, then consequently it looks like maybe there's going to be some political slings and arrows come your way. But the fact of the matter is, I think most people simply want things to be done as best possible. And I mean, that's where I get back to my little adrenaline-induced rant from earlier, is we're just so keenly focused on the political aspect as opposed to the policy aspect. You might not win or lose a vote with an admittance of, making a mistake versus patting yourself on the back for what you think is sound policy. Let's just do things the best possible. I'm just so sick of the way we handle things.
But Patty, if you made, I would agree with you. If you made a misstep, and I would argue that the original approach to this was a misstep, you don't compound it by making yet another misstep. I think yes, this is right. And I think you mentioned the fact about talk about the policy and about making politics boring, and I would agree with you on that. In that it comes down to okay, what is the policy? What is the approach we need to make this, for lack of a better word, go away in a more constructive and creative and respectful way. And that might come down to changing the policy, changing the fee structure, having those meaningful conversations with the funeral homes, who are the ones which are businesses and which are going to try to help resolve their problem. But there are ways of doing this that don't involve building a freezer and moving freezer units downstairs, building a wall around them, installing security doors so people no longer have access to them. All these things, I think, is just highlighted the misstep, and probably, if anything else, it's demonstrated that government seems to be more interested in hiding the problem than resolving it. And I just look at there are families out there. I'm sure they're not going to go to the media about it because they've come to us, but they're not going to go public for the simple reason it's an embarrassment, and no one wants to admit that they couldn't claim their loved ones, their remains, and couldn't afford to pay for it. So simplify the process, do the stuff that actually resolves it. Is boring work, I agree, but I think it would have a longer lasting, more productive, and I guess a lot less stress, a lot less disrespect for the families and the remains.
Yeah, that would be my campaign slogan, make politics boring again. I'll add to it, when there's a shift in policy, tell us exactly what we're doing now, how much it costs, and what the outcomes have been. And add to it the change in policy, say, this is how we're going to measure success. This is what we hope to achieve. And we're going to make sure that we follow along the steps, whether it be quarterly or annually, to see whether or not we're achieving the benchmarks that we set for ourselves. If we're not, let's shift again. I mean, the drawing board is there for a reason. No one packs up the drawing board and puts it in the closet forever. It's out all the time for a specific reason, because things change, things evolve. Government is a living, breathing entity and needs to change with the times. So that's just how things work, whether people like it or not. And
I would agree, as if you want to, as a benchmark or as a measurement of how well we're doing, is if they could report in a year that we've actually reduced the number of bodies, that we have actually reduced the need for these freezer units, then to me that would indicate that they've addressed the issue. That's a very easy one, I guess, in many ways, if you want to look at it like a benchmark or as a measurement of success. But building, if in a year's time you and I are talking about this and they've actually had to increase the number of freezers, that would tell me then that should tell us that really the problem has not been addressed and that government has not been doing the boring work it needs to do.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting none of the boring work takes place, and my comment wasn't necessarily simply about unclaimed bodies. It's just a matter of public policy. It's headline stuff, it's whether it be photo ops. And look, it's not one party is guilty of the photo op opportunity, with all due respect to you and every party and every politician. Everybody's at it. It just seems to be that's what the public craves, and we've kind of set ourselves up for disaster here, whether it be with voter apathy, whether it be about falling for the headlines, whether it be about falling for flourishing rhetoric that happens at rallies, as opposed to actual outcomes. The hard work. the things that have kind of got lost in the shuffle here in the world of celebrity politics. Jim?
Well, I don't know if I put myself in celebrity politics, but I listen. The fact is, it comes. I have my job to do, but you have your job as media to basically hold us accountable, regardless of what party we're with, and to call us out for when we're engaging in, I guess, in that kind of politics. But for me, I guess. On this issue and a lot of the issues, it comes down to just decency for people. And I really think there's a solution. I put it forward before, having the hard conversations with the funeral homes, working through, because I think there's a solution there. If indeed the application process is complicated, then simplified. If there's a way of making it so that the funeral homes can, or however they do this, and work this out with the families after, do that. If it comes down to the need for legislation that gives the government the power to do, and they take the necessary steps to dispose of bodies in a respectful way, then make those changes. They're not going to be done over a night, but I would like to believe and like to see evidence that they're actually making the steps towards those solutions, and that's what I'm finding is seems to be absent in this case.
Appreciate the time, Jim. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care, Paddy.
Bye-bye. Jim Dinn, leader of the NDP and, of course, member for St. John Centre. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the programme. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the province's consumer advocate. That's Dennis Brown. Good morning, Dennis. You're on the air. Good morning, Dennis Brown. You're on the air. Dave, do we know if Mr. Brown is there? All right, he's on hold. Let's keep going here. Let's go to line number 1. Andrew, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Good. I'm calling actually to get some information with regards to a financial program that was mentioned in the budget by the government for pre-seniors, 60 to 64, before their 65th birthday. Since the budget has been passed, do you know what has happened to that program?
No, I don't, but I can find out very quickly.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, so put it this way. I will get that information at the tip of my fingers here as soon as possible. And when I do, I'll talk about it live on the show. Or would you like to, I'll put you on hold and I'll have another call. Robert, how would you like me to handle it?
Yeah, that's fine. You could do that. Either way, it works with me. Okay,
let me see if I can bring it up here because I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know the status.
Okay, good.
All right, I'll talk about it live. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, that's a good question, and I should know that one. But let's go to line number 4. Bob, you're on the air.
Yeah. Paddy, the big ticket, I won't bother to say good morning and how are you. The big ticket items in Newfoundland are the fishery, Churchill Falls, and equalization, as far as injustices are concerned, right?
Okay.
Hello? Yeah, if Newfoundland don't make a good deal on the upper Churchill, I think that will break Newfoundland. That'll be the limit, you know. We can't, it's like we just can't win and never will, or we're cursed or something, right? Or we don't have a chance. I mean, why, you know, we don't have to be nice to Quebec now. You know, I don't think we should be nice.
When have we ever been nice to Quebec?
Well, we haven't been unnice. We haven't been done justice to what they've done to us, you know.
We were complicit in what happened to us. We signed the contract.
Yeah, but I don't know. We appealed it a few times and lost out.
7 times, I think.
Yeah, we were complicit, but I think we were overrun. There was a lot of irregularities, and I never looked into. It was an injustice, a most horrible thing that could happen to anybody, and we had to bear that for over 50 years now, and there's another 20. But anyway, the whole point is, what do we do now? I don't think we should make a deal with Quebec. What they want to do now, I mean, if we're complicit, they're going to try to do the same thing over again if they can get away with it. So why don't we try to get control of it? They want to open up the contract and extend the contract, and as if nothing ever happened. Why don't we try to wait and get control of that, and then we'll have the control of the three falls, the three places, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Why wouldn't we try to reopen a deeply flawed contract? We've taken them to court 7 times on it. They've won. Well, I'll use the number 7. I think that's the one. And they've won each time. Isn't there an opportunity, if it's there, for redress from 1949? Pardon me, from 69 on, and for the next 16 years? Why wouldn't we try to open it and see if we can get some benefit out of it? And if we can't, then we just let it roll until 2041, of which I think there's a distinct misunderstanding what that actually means. The equity position does not change on that. Quebec alone what they own, CFLco alone what they own, it'll just be a renegotiation of the rates afforded to the power for either Hydro-Quebec and or us. So why wouldn't we try to do something better?
No, I think the way to go is to try for control. Like, we can't develop Gull Island without Quebec. It's all about upper waters, and if they make another deal, well, we can't make a deal on Gull Island either.
Well, that's probably part of the
conversation. If we waited and got control, we could end up with control of the three waters, the three falls.
But how does that work? I mean, we've tried to regain control and we've been unsuccessful, so I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, they only got 1/3 and we got 2/3. That means when the time comes, another 18 years, we got control over the Upper Churchill.
Equity positions don't change. What will change is in negotiating how much per megawatt anybody gets from power provided by the Upper Churchill. Equity position percentages do not change. Since the contract was struck, the province of Quebec has brought in about $28 billion. Newfoundland and Labrador, about $2 billion. There's a reason why Quebec gets equalization, because they're able to subsidize power rates for their customers in the province. And consequently, that's one of those stupid loopholes that I think the entire country would like to see closed.
Yeah, well, that's why I say we wait. That's the only way to go. You're not going to outdo Quebec because Ottawa can't. The parties can't get elected if they don't cater to Quebec, and we're in a bad position. They're trying to deal with Ottawa and Quebec. And Ottawa will throw in a whole lot of incentives, and before you know it, you'll have a deal you can't get out of it.
I don't know if Ottawa plays much of a role here in this 2041 conversation. Fact of the matter is...
Anyway, we know how important Quebec is in re-election.
Yeah, but I don't think the feds have much to do with this conversation, period. And, I mean, Hydro-Quebec, I read some of the Quebec-based papers fairly frequently. They talk about this a lot. I mean, Hydro-Quebec has contractual obligations of which 15% of their entire portfolio is the Upper Churchill. So for them to be able to advance and to expand their markets, they need the Upper Churchill. They quite simply do, and they've said as much. And let's also remember that Premier Legault, he pretty much instigated this conversation about reopening the contract. If we can't satisfy so-called political and financial victory here, then we should do nothing. And we should wait for whatever you think is an opportunity to regain some more control, even though I'm a little bit confused about that part. But unless we can achieve a victory, then we just let it ride.
Yeah, sure, he said that he don't mind walking away. I hope he do. That's what I hope happens.
Right.
But I don't know how they can sign a contract legally now if they only got 18 years left, and you're not going to sign less than the 20-year contract. Would that be? Couldn't we contest that? Or
no, they're not trying to bring a new contract. What the effort is, my understanding is to reopen the contract to look at how much money either side has got. So whether it be redress from 69 to today, whether it be to change the formula from today to 41, as opposed to say, well, you might be right, they might be talking about an extension of the contract, but the lifespan of that facility also has to be taken into consideration. And I don't think you're wrong in talking about Gull either. I mean, Jennifer Williams at Hydro says they're about 10 steps advanced what people think regarding Gull Island. And And yes, I'm sure Hydro-Quebec would love to be involved in that particular project and the implications of Muskrat Falls. So there's a lot to this. I don't imagine there's anything fundamentally simple or straightforward to this conversation, but I think it's completely worth our while to see if we can't, wiggle a little something out of Hydro-Quebec at this moment in time. And they've got some heavy hitters. And I mean, I know Carl Smith is, I would suggest, up to the task here to be part of these negotiations, but we always have to be very, very cautious when dealing with Hydro-Quebec because they're one of the biggest bullies on the block.
Yeah, the other second item I had was equalization. I don't think, how can you browbeat Ottawa into giving us more money? If that is a just program, we shouldn't be able to do that.
Who says it's just?
And Danny Williams went up and got a small fortune out of him, and how come he could do that? And recently they adjusted equalization when they see fit. It don't seem to be right what's going on there. I mean, I don't think we should what Fury's doing now is a great thing, really. But I don't think we should just look for equal treatment with equalization. We should have an investigation of how all the other provinces are applying equalization. That'd be more important to me.
What does that mean? How the provinces are applying equalization? The provinces don't apply equalization. It's a federal government revenue side formula. And provinces don't pay equalization. Individual Canadians pay equalization, which is completely misunderstood, especially in Western Canada.
Well, you can't have it both ways, Paddy. If Quebec coming over with Churchill Falls and use a loophole and get more than they should be getting, we don't know what's going on with that program, do we?
Well, we should be able to get an explainer at least what 2041 means in real terms. And, I understand where the Premier says we're not going to negotiate in public. That makes all the sense in the world. I mean, why show your cards? Maybe jeopardize some possibility for a better deal, whatever that actually means. Anything else this morning, Bob?
Yeah, I wanted to quickly on the fishery. John Crosby said he didn't take the fish out of GD water.
Right.
But actually he did. He was fishery minister for a good while there. And what better position can a Newfoundlander be than be fishery minister in Ottawa?
The problem was brewing for decades before John Crosby was the Minister of Fisheries.
Oh, yeah, I know that, but he was complicit, like you say, in everything that was going on. He didn't do anything about it while he was in there. And if you can't do it when you're fishery minister, what chance have you got? There's the questions I got. How do other countries handle their offshore? Do they have 200-mile limits, or do they have their continental shelf?
Well, not every country applies the same sort of threshold there, but there is such a thing known as an economic protective zone around most every country. And I think that fluctuates. Like, for instance, there's different rules for some small island states versus some big countries like Canada and Russia and Japan and the like, but there is an economic protective zone. That's a thing.
Do Russia fish off our offshore?
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder, do anyone go in there inside their offshore?
I don't know.
I think our problem is that, I'm computer illiterate. And when I've been like that, I've said that for a long time. And when you're computer illiterate, you're functionally illiterate.
Okay.
And, I got to be willing to humiliate myself, but all those questions don't seem to be being asked. I heard you asking a lot this morning. It seemed like you were on a roll. But I don't have that.
Anyway, Bob, I got to get going.
Okay.
I appreciate the time.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye. And, I mentioned the fact that heavy hitters at the helm of Hydro-Quebec, Michael Sabia. He was once the clerk of the Privy Council. He was the president and chief financial officer of Canadian National Railway. He was the chief executive of Bell Canada. So, he's been around the block politically and in the financial world. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Juan, you're on the air.
Yeah. Hey, Patty. I hope you're doing well.
Doing fine, Juan. Happy Independence Day.
Yeah, that's actually the reason I was calling in. My wife and I, we split our time between Carbonear and states and all that, and there's been a lot of real important issues mentioned today and all that. I want to commend you for how you've been handling everything, but just wanted to just call in and wish all the other Americans up here a happy 4th of July. I'm sure everybody, is somewhat aware of what's going on in the States, but I am of the sincere belief that everything's going to be okay, and we're going to settle everything in November. So.
Yeah, and I'm completely disinterested in American politics, to be honest with you. It's all bad enough in Canada and getting worse, but that is crazy town. When you talk about the political discourse in the United States of America, it's really something to behold. But are you in Carbonear now, or are you in the United States?
Yes, we actually just recently came back. We were down in the States to help my 94-year-old mother as she moved into just a wonderful senior living community that we've been hoping to get her in. So we're actually back here, and this is the place that you really need to be, because back in North Carolina, Tennessee, wherever, they're hitting 90 every day, and it's just if anybody's been down there this time of year, it's just truly all but unbearable when you go outside. It's just of course, everybody knows it's wonderful up here, but no, we're here for the summer and enjoying the weather up here and keeping a close eye on what's going on. And just as an aside, I guess we will wait on the final results out of the UK, because they were supposed to finish up on their elections, I think, by the end of today, and looks like the Labour Party will be taking the place of the Conservatives. So
it looks pretty clear. The polls have been devastating for the Conservatives, and their 14 years in power have been highly questionable, I would suggest. And the people who have been the leader of that party, the Prime Minister of England or Britain, is just a really bizarre list of people. Some real oddballs have been, at 4 Downing Street. So we'll see what happens. But it looks very much like the next Prime Minister of Britain is going to be Keir Starmer, based on what? Nothing but people fed up with the Conservatives. Because he doesn't even talk about policy.
Yeah, well, that's my understanding. But like I said, just wanted to wish myself and the other Americans up here a happy 4th, and anybody else who wants to join us, that'll be great.
I have American family. My Aunt Audrey, now deceased, married an American serviceman and lived most of her adult life in the United States, and so I have cousins who are born and raised Americans, and I wish them a happy 4th of July. And I tell you what, Canada makes a pretty big deal out of Canada Day across the country, but the Americans and the 4th of July is an entirely different kettle of fish. It is over the top, out of control patriotism. The Americans, regardless of their political stripe, Americans are pretty good at that patriotic business.
Yeah, it's fun. So I'd like to encourage everybody to have a hot dog today.
Fair enough. You got me talking to it.
Okay.
Thanks, Juan.
You take care. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All the best. Bye-bye. There you go. So that was Juan, and coming up shortly is Dwan Street, who is one of the 3 running for the FFAW presidency. Very quickly, Andrew's question about the income support for ages 60 to 64. In the most recent provincial budget, that was part of what they call the envelope of the poverty reduction plan. So it was almost $5 million, and it's about implementing a targeted basic income pilot for people in that age bracket, 60 to 64. It's supported by, but you have to be on income support, I believe, because it's a partnership between NL Health Services, the Community Supports Program, and Income Support. The status of that, unknown. I will find out for you, Andrew, for others who are on income support between the ages of 60 and 64 in this targeted basic income pilot. Now remember, it was a overwhelming unanimous vote of 40-0 for the provincial government to strike a committee to look at the concept of basic income. Some people just poo-poo it and say that, whatever ism they call it, socialism or communism or whatever the case may be, there's ups and downs to it. People talk about the lack of motivation and Canada's problem already with productivity, those types of things. But it's not my number. Every member of the House of Assembly voted in favour of looking at it, not implementing it, looking at how it could or might not work. Let's take a break for the news. Do not go away.
Your voice in Newfoundland and Labrador's biggest conversation.
If you want to know what's happening in your province, tune in to Openline every day.
Have your say weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. on Openline with Paddy Daly on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 7 and say good morning to one of the three candidates vying to be the next president of the FFAW. That's Dwan Street. Good morning, Dwan. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. Looking forward to getting out in the bit of sunshine and fresh air here this afternoon.
I bet. And yes, happy 4th of July to our American friends and to your previous caller. Before I start here today, I just want to extend sympathies to the family of Mick Simmons. Mick served on our Inshore Council for many, many years. A very, very well-respected man, and he passed away there a little over a week ago. So to his family, I just want to say he will be missed around the table. And I heard Peter calling yesterday, and that's what I wanted to call in about as well, as Northern Cod. Before I get into that, I just wanted to thank Peter as well for his support, and it means a lot to me when folks who have such a storied history and experience and are so well respected in this industry put their support behind me. So I just wanted to thank Peter Leonard for that. The decision on Northern Cod, Paddy, what an absolute disgusting slap in the face that's been. And I know folks watched our press conference and have seen the social media campaign and the petition to Parliament. But, we talk about the commitment to the inshore for the first 115,000 metric tons. And we've talked about that now for a few years. And I think there's a bit of a misconception about that folks are being led to believe that stemmed from a 2015 letter from Justin Trudeau to the union, where he committed to allocate that first 115,000 metric tons to the inshore fishery, inshore and Indigenous. And while that is true, and folks kind of dismiss that as, well, that was an election promise, he was trying to get elected. That commitment is not that new. And it actually came from an August 1979 Northern Cod seminar in Corner Brook. And it was Romeo LeBlanc that made that commitment. And that commitment has been reaffirmed by various governments, by the Senate, in documentation from 1982, 86, 2008. So it's not a new commitment. And it's a DFO policy. And to see this government completely go back on such a historic sharing arrangement is nothing short of a slap in the face.
My question, based solely on remarks coming from Minister O'Regan, about the technicality of simply expanding the stewardship fishery versus lifting moratorium and reinstating a commercial fishery, which comes with some automatic triggers. And this is not a Liberal or a Tory thing. This is the NAFO commitment that the country has made, period. But he says, you can't have your cake and eat it too, which I'm not really sure what that means. But if the addition of 5,000 tons, and only 5,000 tons, somehow automatically triggered a commercial fishery, that makes no sense to me. I cannot find anywhere where it says this many tons constitutes commercial, as opposed to we are allowed to have a stewardship fishery up to whatever number, 18, 25, 30. There's no real hard and fast rule here, so I don't really know where the federal government is coming off by saying, hey, well, if we're going to increase the TAC, then it has to be commercial. No, it doesn't.
No, it absolutely does not. And you were right in one of your previous calls when you said that the moratorium was a problem that was brewing for decades. And what we're seeing right now is also a problem that's been brewing for decades, because we knew that when that word changed from stewardship to commercial, immediately there were going to be NAFO implications, and then we were going to see the offshoring. I mean, Peter talked about 3PS, and of course, in my full-time role with the FFAW, I'm the staff rep for 3PS, and we see it there. We see exactly what can happen. And there was actually a similar commitment in 3PS that once the attack in that area went below 10,000 metric tons, the offshore was to be removed. And government failed us on that as well. So this is, governments kind of turn their back on inshore harvesters in situations like this isn't not new. But to only give 1/3 of that 5,000-ton increase to the inshore and to turn this fishery into a commercial fishery where we're going to see draggers back at it. I mean, the northern cod stock, Patty, is the most studied scientifically stock in the world. It's the poster child for mismanagement and overfishing. And it's also the poster child of not listening to inshore harvesters and what happens when you do. So I really don't understand where government's head is on this one. The inshore harvesters, with this small allocation of 18,000 metric tons, their communities rely on this. We don't have all of our members with 1 million pounds of snow crab. Cod is a significant portion of their enterprise, and those few weeks that they get harvesting that resource, it makes a significant difference. And I think what we're seeing here, there's a larger picture here as well, right? Because we saw it with redfish. We're going to have draggers. You're going to look off your step in 4R and see draggers dragging redfish when inshore harvesters are barred out of that opportunity. We're going to see draggers in 2J3KL fishing northern cod and doing exactly the same thing that happened before in destroying that stock because, I'm sorry, offshore corporations are not stewards of this resource. And we have draggers right now in 3PS pillaging the remains of that stock. I mean, I don't know how much louder we can get on this and what it's going to take for government to wake up and realize that you're about to go right down the same path that you went with a historic stock that has so much data on it, that you have harvesters telling you they have nursed this stock back to health now for decades. And what you're going to do is do exactly what you did before and let the offshore just completely clean it up. It makes no sense.
Well, the implication of the type of gear, I think, is part of maybe the biggest part of this conversation because, as you say, the inshore had nursed it back with the type of gear they use and the short soak time of the gill net and some hand lining and what have you. So the draggers have proven to be devastating in the past. Add to it when you talk about the first 115,000 ton for the inshore, with the way this has been handled, now it's very likely, I can't say for sure, but it looks quite certain in many corners, that the 7% for indigenous communities, 3% for Nunatuck of it is going to be fished by the offshore as well. So add to that and the gear issue, then we've got ourselves a really strange decision.
We really do. And I mean, when we talk about gear types, just remind everybody that, the jigger is illegal, but a trawl is not. Right? I mean, that's the kind of foolishness that we're dealing with here. And you're right. A lot of those indigenous quotas are going to be fished by draggers. And it's so frustrating that it simply took a changing of stewardship to commercial. And all of a sudden, the floodgates are open again, right? And, I grew up in the area of the moratorium, and I remember the draggers. I remember seeing the Tide of Import Union. I remember the small fish on the top of the water as well. And, are we going to go back there? Are we really going to put the livelihoods of inshore harvesters and communities and plant workers, because that fish is not going into the plant, that's being processed on board. Are we really going to put that socioeconomic opportunity in jeopardy for the sake of giving the offshore 1,000 tons? And, I hear some folks also saying, well, it's only 1,000 tons for now. This stock is growing, and as that stock grows and the TAC increases, that number is going to grow as well. So it's concerning, and I encourage everybody to go online and sign the FFAW petition to Parliament. We need this change. We need this fishery returned back to a stewardship fishery, because inshore harvesters are the stewards of this resource, and they're the ones that are taking care of this stock. And if we allow the offshore to do what they did in 3PS, where we watched a attack of 13,000 tons go down to where we are now, I mean, like 3,000 tons, harvesters with 4,000 pounds of cod to catch. And you just can't make a go on 4,000 pounds of cod, right? It just doesn't make sense. So, I'm really, really concerned about this decision. I think it's a blunder on behalf of the minister. And, to hear our own MPs mostly silent and the ones who are not to justify this, it's... I just don't know what to say.
I'm not sure what the reaction would have been like had the redfish allocation been different. I really do think that the union was all ginned up, ready to react the way you are to this particular decision. And for the most part, I understand and agree with the position. But when redfish was handled the way it was, and a certain amount went to capacity that was non-existent, I just knew full well that if the Northern Cod decision went this way, then the reaction was going to be absolutely furious. Now, I'm not saying that you wouldn't have been outraged or angry or frustrated with the decision in the first place, but I think given the redfish issue, it's amped it up.
Redfish, the minister completely pulled the rug out from underneath us on that one. There was a coalition across provinces of inshore harvesters and organizations who did a lot of good work leading up to the announcement of a commercial redfish fishery. And many of them from the minister's own constituency and who are reliant on that stock. And they felt pretty good. And at the end of the day, the minister put the boots to her own crowd. I don't understand. And, I do have a theory that it's leading up to election that, they're kind of taking care of their corporate buddies. But that in itself is worrisome because, like I said, the technology doesn't even exist for redfish harvesting for the offshore right now. And that's going to take investment. Is that money going to come from government? Is that money that could have been invested into the inshore fleet, the 4-hour inshore fleet, who are absolutely struggling right now? Their shrimp stock has been decimated. They have nothing. And they're teetering on the edges of losing everything. And I just don't think this government cares. And, leading into an election, I think government is very, very short-sighted right now on who their voters are. Because harvesters are not going to forget who let their communities die, who let their enterprises die, who wasn't there to support them when they needed it. And I mean, that's what we expect from our government. And Diane Laboutier, she's not new to the fishery. She's from a fishing district. So, I think we had a bit of faith in her that she would understand. And from all signs and conversations that we had with her, it seemed like she did understand. But whatever the motivation is to make some of these decisions and do what she's done, I just don't get it. And I think there's a missing piece here somewhere that I just don't understand.
Me neither. I appreciate the time. I wish you good luck out on the campaign trail.
Thanks, Patty. And just one more thing. There was a headline in the Globe that said Newfoundland and Labrador harvesters beg to have this fishery returned to a stewardship fishery. And I thought that was a pretty disgusting headline, actually, because if anybody knows the history of the FFAW, there's a very iconic picture out of the 1971 Burgeo strike. And that sign says, "Never again shall we beg." And we don't beg for anything. We need to demand this, and we need to get results. And as president, I just want to make the commitment that our days of begging and our days of asking politely are over. And that we will demand and we get results, because we simply cannot sit by when decisions like this are made.
Thank you, Duane. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye. Duane Street, one of the candidates for the presidency at the FFAW. And not to throw cold water on it, because the union will have their own stance, and so be it. But, there is going to be a concept of whether or not reversing this decision has a concept of bad faith, regarding some offshore and NAFO obligations and stuff like that, even though I think even just if you boil it down to the gear-related issue, that's a problem. Very quickly, you talk about investing in the inshore. Remember, there was a press conference at the Rooms, then Premier Dunderdale, and the Shallow Choir or the QV or whoever were there, and they were chuffed about the fisheries fund that they had negotiated with Ottawa. So it was going to be $400 million, $250 million of which would come from the federal government. Years later, when that didn't happen, all of a sudden it's the Atlantic Fisheries Fund with the same $400 million over the course of 7 years. So we didn't quite get what we were talking about at that particular glitzy and expensive press conference at the Rooms. Let's take a break. We'll make back. The province's consumer advocate is Dennis Brown. He's next. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Well, the Newfoundland Power rate hearings have concluded at the PUB. There will be a public participation day coming up for next Tuesday, the 9th of July at 9:30 a.m. To join us on the line, tell us about the hearings, is the province's consumer advocate. That's Dennis Brown. Dennis, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
We had 11 days of hearings at the Public Utilities Board on Newfoundland Power's rate application, and there were about 10 witnesses who came forward, mainly experts in dealing with the cost of capital, what Newfoundland Power is due and what they are not due. And Newfoundland Power had its own witnesses they brought forward, telling about their financial circumstances. And, of course, we have Public Participation Day coming up on Tuesday at the Public Utilities Board.
What actually happens there, Dennis? What does that even mean?
Public Participation Day gives an opportunity for ratepayers to come forward and express their views on the application and tell of their own circumstances and how the application will affect them. Ratepayers can also contact the board at 709-726-8600 and find a way to leave a message there expressing their views to the board itself in that method. And also the board is on Facebook, they're on LinkedIn, and the board wants to hear from ratepayers. I realize it's the summer and people are out and about doing their business, having a vacation, doing the things of the summer. But and I've been contacted by numerous people to express their concern about Newfoundland Power's rate increase. Why should people come forward? Well, very simply, Newfoundland Power is looking for a huge rate increase on their profit. They want to move from 8.5% on their rate of return to 9.8%. And that will give them a profit, which is now $48 million annually, nearly $1 million a week. That will give them, if they got what they're looking for, $62 million, a 28% increase, moving from $48 million to $62 million. That's profit. Their expenses are all paid for. They have more applications on dealing with their expenses. So it's a pretty atrocious ask. And they were obviously oblivious or could care less about the circumstances, the economic circumstances facing ordinary people. And they are doing or attempting to do real damage to the government's rate mitigation plan. So they are out of control by even putting that ask to the Public Utilities Board, and they have to be reined in, and the regulator has to do something here.
Some of the experts that were brought in, give us a couple of high-level commentary coming from the experts on whatever specific area.
Well, the Newfoundland Power brought forward American experts to show in the United States, utilities in the United States, what they are making on their rate of return. And in the United States, they're getting more than 8.5%. So, and the Americans use, like Duke Energy, they use that as an example, what Duke Energy gets in its rate of return, one of the largest companies in the world. What has that to do with Newfoundland Power? Here in this province, a relatively small utility, but they're using the evidence from these larger corporations to say they get more than 8.5%, so therefore in this province in Canada, the American procedures, the American way should be adopted. We objected to that evidence. The Supreme Court of Canada has said Canadian securities are what should be considered by boards. And we brought forward Dr. Lawrence Booth from the University of Toronto, a distinguished scholar, and he said they should not be making any more than 7.7%. And he said the American evidence should not be brought into this Canadian jurisdiction. We also brought on Doug Bowman, a rate design expert, and he pointed out that all across Canada now, people have smart meters. And by 2027, 93% of Canadians will have smart meters. We asked Newfoundland Power concerning their plans for smart meters in this jurisdiction. They have no plans. They said we'll look at all that after 2030. Well, smart meters help people in every way. They help people control their intake in electricity. They help with the introduction of time of use rates. And that's why every other province in Canada, with the exception of Manitoba and up in Iqaluit, have adopted smart meters. They're in Nova Scotia, they're in New Brunswick, they're everywhere else. And we are outliers here. And why Newfoundland Power won't do even that much by bringing forward an application to ensure every household has smart meters is just beyond me. The expert was puzzled. It's an obvious thing that should be done. It would help control the costing for ratepayers. It helps control peaks at Holyrood. You know, you have different time rates, so when you're into peak periods at Holyrood, you could have a more expensive rate, so that people will do what's required in their own homes, you know, with their dishwashers and washing clothes and using electricity for various electives that people have in their homes at different times of the day. They would get a lesser rate later on to do that, which would bring down peak. It all makes perfect sense.
Right.
It
would also be a benefit.
Sorry, go ahead.
It'd also be a benefit to the grid, because of course, be more stability, less peak load, and consequently, probably less opportunity for trips and problems and the rest of it. So, anyway.
Oh, absolutely. So the whole thing is completely puzzling. In the meantime, the evidence is Newfoundland Power's operating expenses are way out of control. They just filed a capital budget a few days ago, just as the rate application ended at the board, which is the highest in their history. Newfoundland Power doesn't seem to care. They don't, that capital budget goes ahead every year, every 12 months. And they've got that increased now to from what was $100 million just a couple of years ago to $130 million. The regulator has to do something with Newfoundland Power. And I think the regulator appears to be listening. So ordinary people, ordinary ratepayers who want their views heard are free to come to the board on Tuesday at 9:30, or they can contact the board. They can write a letter. They can send an email and do their part to ensure that ordinary ratepayers are heard.
Very quickly, Newfoundland Power has a guesstimate about how much the implementation of smart meters would cost, and some of the meters that we're using now are very soon going to be out of date anyway and antiquated. So did any expert present a more rational number for the cost of implementation of smart meters, different from Newfoundland Power numbers?
Well, Newfoundland Power's numbers, according to one expert, states that smart meters can be implemented for an amount of $80 million to $100 million. Now, that doesn't all take place in 1 year. That would be over a 10-year period that these costs are paid. It's like everything else Newfoundland Power does. If Newfoundland Power are changing transmission or doing work on their generating facilities, which they have, that's not all paid for in 1 year. It's paid for over time. And the fact that all the rest of Canada are doing it without seeing a rate bump tells us that it can be done here. So Newfoundland Power is completely disingenuous in telling people this is going to cost $100 million and we don't have it. Well, they don't have it in 1 year, but they'll certainly have it over 10 or 12 years. So they pay for that the same way they pay for everything else. So smart meters are coming, Patty. We're not going to be the only jurisdiction in Canada that don't have them, We need them here. Ratepayers need them. It will assist with rate mitigation efforts, and that's something we are going to push. And we brought the only expert in to really testify on that, and we're looking for something to be done on it.
Appreciate the time, Dennis. Off to the news we go.
Thank you very much, Fatty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Dennis Brown, the province's consumer advocate. Let's take a break. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Mike, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty. Good morning.
Good morning.
Patty, I was listening. I want to speak about the Ms. Longstreet's comments. I was driving along when I heard her call. But while I was waiting, I did hear your comments to Mr. Brown. But there's a connection between what Mr. Brown said and what Ms. Street says. The Public Utilities Board that rules on these applications, it's a personal feeling that I don't think it's ever met an application that it didn't like. It's a bit of a shell game. I appeared before it, oh my God, many years ago when this facility group came in, the high risk insurance thing. And they were looking for this massive increase. And the proponent brings in all kinds of advocacy consultants, experts, wants to back up their position. And the board really it's sort of like a fish gets focused on a lure, Patty. The people on the board get really impressed by these consultants. And so the person that's looking for the rate increase, the group, the company, the insurance company, whatever it is, the light and power company, whatever it is, they go in and they might need 2 or 3%. They may not need any, but they'll ask for 10. And they'll settle for 5. You know what I mean? They'll be wounded, and they'll take a lesser amount and never really expect them to get what they ask for. Well, it's the same thing that's going on there's no difference in what's going on the street. Who, by the way, I think would make a wonderful president for the union. I've been following that closely. Living in Newfoundland and Labrador, what happens in that union is important to me. So she's got the education, the work experience, obviously the smarts and the guts to be able to do things. But the union each year gets, it's really not a part of the equation. It's the outlier. Fisheries science comes in, and they'll give, and fisheries science does not have a good reputation. By the way, it sat quietly through all of this, rather than the moratorium and everything else. But it brings in recommendations, and then it goes up to the minister's office. And Patty, that's where the advocates come in. That's where the consultants, a team of they're embedded in the fisheries office and in federal fisheries in the upper echelons. That's where the large offshore companies control the game. That's how they come. Ms. Street says she doesn't understand where that comes from. Well, that's where that comes from. The union has nobody other than the union speaking for it. The province of Newfoundland and Labrador hides from any discussion on quotas. It says, well, that's a federal issue. That's not us. And they've been allowed to do that, Patty. And so if the union wants to know what it can do, it needs a political action committee. It really needs to say, you know what, we're not going to worry about these people here down in the White Hills in the bunker at DFO. We're not going to worry about the bureaucrats in the offices and their consultant friends in Ottawa. We're going to make life miserable for the politicians in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador and those MPs who seek to represent Newfoundland and Labrador. The only bit of power they got is there. That's all they've got. Nothing else. And, for decades, Patty, nobody has been able to do anything with federal fisheries. They just can't do it. We keep going deeper in the hole, offshore trawlers, draggers, TFO, quite frankly, really doesn't give. I was back there in the 80s. I was a director with fisheries, and it was an embarrassment to see the way they treated Newfoundland and Labrador. So, yeah, Ms. Street and anybody else in that union, you want to get some power, create your own power. Forget dealing with the bureaucracy. They're immune to you. They've got bunkers. They don't care what you think. What goes on Kent Street is that's how it comes out. That's how the minister and other ministers before her do this. And if you want to give yourself some power, we'll work with what you got. The province of Newfoundland and Labrador, don't let them walk away from this issue. Make it their issue. Make them have a say in it. And Seamus O'Regan and Goody Hutchings, Anybody but Liberal. If that's the way it's got to be, I'd encourage the union and the street to go down that road and stop being kicked around. Stop begging.
Yeah, I think she was pretty clear and used a really good time reference regarding the no more begging concept. To build a conversation based on a Globe and Mail headline, I don't really know what that's got to do with anything. But the fact of a political ally regarding the provincial fisheries minister, haven't heard a peep.
Not a word. You never will. And therein lies the problem. These people, same thing on seals. The Provincial Department of Fisheries on Marketing has one person, worse than the Maytag repair person. Can't find him anywhere. He's isolated up in some corner. That's all they got. The only thing that they have an input in is the Marine Institute. And you know what the Marine Institute's projects are nowadays? Anything to improve the operation of a trawler, a dragger. Take a look at their project. They're all related to the big fish companies. Phyllis Street made a very valid point. She really did when she said that, it's embarrassing. Yeah, it's embarrassing. It should be. Time to stop begging. Now, don't be foolish and stupid about it. I got my problems with the union on the food fishery. But I tell you one thing, without them, we're going to be in a bigger mess than we got now.
This is directly from Tuan Street. She says, one of her election commitments is to hire a lobbyist in Ottawa. So there you go. Just add that to the conversation.
Well, they're also connected with what? Unifor has got 200,000 or 300,000 members in it's at FFAW Unifor, and Unifor is connected throughout North America, throughout the States, and I'd really encourage her to utilize that power. I mean, I think Lana Payne, our own Lana Payne, nobody's fool by any stretch of the imagination, is the head of Unifor now. And if you've got to get power, there's your power. Bring in your friends. But I'll tell you one thing. Anybody sitting in that Confederation building or up in the fisheries building, I would make life so miserable for them. They would not be allowed to hide and make this a hide and leave it with DFO. They should be all over DFO like a wet blanket. And if that's what Ms. Street's doing, I commend her for it. Really do.
Appreciate the call, Mike. Thanks for doing it.
I'm just speaking to you, sir. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Before we get to the break, let's go to line number 3. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you for taking my call, Patty.
My pleasure.
I'm calling what I think, in my opinion, is insurance fraud. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but years ago I bought a life insurance, and if I say to you, your life insurance is term, wouldn't you expect that you would have to die in order to get that?
Term life insurance?
Yes.
Well, you can cash in your term life insurance policy, which is probably the most chosen policy for seniors and retirees because it's a bit more affordable, it's a bit more flexible.
Well, I didn't do that, and I wasn't told that. I was told it was term, and I was buying it when I was younger to help out a friend who was going for Salesman of the Year. And my husband often told me after 3 or 4 years, you're wasting your money. Invest it instead of that. You'll never get back. So back about a month or so ago, I would notice it wasn't payments coming out of my account again. So I picked up the phone and phoned the insurance company to ask them. I thought I had my policy all paid up and everything. Took her ever so long to find out where I was. When she finally found my policy, she said, you're no longer covered. You've turned 80.
Right. Just let me correct myself. You can't cash out term, but you can cash out whole life. Because term policies don't actually generate cash value, but a whole life policy you can cash out, but you cannot cash out a term life. Just mix that up.
Well, anyway, I assumed that if I died, she said, if you had died before you were 80, we would have covered you. I said, this is when I need it. Now, I'm not going to live much beyond 80. This is when I need the life insurance after paying it all those years. And she said, no, you're no longer covered because you've turned 80. So I want to warn seniors that if they have some life insurance policy and they're about to turn 80 or are 80, they better check on it because if they die tomorrow, they won't be covered.
Right.
The other topic I wanted to tell you, yesterday, I always thought I was too smart to be scammed, but they got a new scam in Newfoundland now. They're calling and saying, well, Bell Alliant is my phone company. And so they called and told me that Bell Alliant, I didn't have on my glasses at the time, but I did see it was a 709 number, so I figured it was Newfoundland. And they called and told me they were warning me that I was being scammed, that they were warning me that somebody was trying to get into my bank account. And after being on the line with them for quite some time, I suddenly caught on when they started talking about Lululemons and to go ask if I ever shopped there. And I said, I never tell them that store's in Halifax somewhere. I said, I'm in Newfoundland. And when he told me to go get cards at Shoppers or whatever, I knew it was a scam. So that was the end of that. But he was getting into my bank accounts, and I had to quickly call Bank of Montreal and get the card canceled. But they also got all my ID information off my computer and everything now. So I got to call Fraud Canada. My internet was telling me I got to call Fraud Canada. Well, I called the RNC and called my credit card company and all this sort of thing. So, I just wanted to warn citizens, if they're getting a call saying they're Bell Alliant, it's a scam.
Hang up and call them back. It's always the rule of thumb I go with.
Yeah, because they said they were my phone company, I normally would have done that. But because they said they were my phone company and it was real early morning, my brain wasn't right in gear, you know what I mean? But anyway, if you got a minute, I'll comment on the funeral services. I heard this morning that they're stacking up the bodies in there again. Here on the West Coast, if you buy a plot over at our graveyard services here, you got to pay $2,000 for a plot. And now they got a new scam out, $700 for a shield. Besides the plot you buy, $700, you got to put a shield on it now for the environment. Another $700. But I buried my sister back a few years ago. My parents had a prepaid funeral, and it was a very simple funeral, and it cost us almost $16,000. So you're talking $15,000 or $16,000 for an ordinary funeral, plus your plot, plus all these other expenses now if you were to bury someone. So who in the world, unless you're a business or something, got that kind of money? So I can understand why the bodies are being left, and it's really, really sad.
It's a lot of expense and not a whole lot of support out there for people who are having a hard time making ends meet in the first place. I appreciate you making time for the show. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's take our final break of the morning. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Carmela, you're on the air. Line number 1, Carmela, are you there?
Oh, yep. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, I was just calling in. I was listening to your conversation with Sadie from the MUN protesters, and I just wanted to comment on what you said about Kraken Robotics and the equipment that they're manufacturing for Elbit Systems. Just wanted to clarify that Kraken Robotics actually makes the Catfish. It's a sonar system that's attached to Elbit's Seagull unmanned surface vessel, and in fact, the Seagull USV is an offensive tool that's used to maintain Israel's siege, underwater siege, coastal siege on Gaza. So the Seagull USV is fitted with machine guns and torpedoes, and the Catfish sonar system enables that system to be able to function, to sense what's underwater.
Isn't the Catfish a mine hunting piece of equipment?
It is used for mines, but it's also used for underwater intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions.
Okay, and this is an honest question. So, is that technology, the Catfish, and the relationship with the Elbit systems required for any on-land machinery and or drones in the air as opposed to underwater surveillance and mine hunting?
So it's not primarily used for mine hunting. It is primarily used to maintain the coastal siege on Gaza. And so, as you know, the coastal siege on Gaza is a large part of why Gazans are stuck and cut off from the rest of the world. So in order to maintain the siege, Israel has to maintain a complete lack of accessibility to the coast of Gaza so that Gazans cannot use the water, cannot leave via the water, and no one can approach Gaza via the water. So maintaining underwater siege is a huge part of Israel's operation to cut Palestinians off from the rest of the world and maintain the siege.
I'm not sure that's exactly what Kraken has to say, and I don't think they've commented in the news, because even when there was protests outside their office, and I know members of the media were looking for some comment about exactly what catfish does, exactly how it's utilized, exactly what it means for on land operations and or at sea operations.
I don't think Kraken is going to come out and say that's bad PR. They're not going to come out and say, yes, our catfish system is used for maintaining a siege on a primarily civilian population. I don't think they're going to come out and say that.
Well, they've said quite clearly on their own website exactly what the equipment is and how it can be used. So that's public knowledge.
It's a sonar system that Elbit says is used for remotely operated mine countermeasures and underwater intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions. So that's what Elbit Systems uses it for, regardless of what Kraken wants it to be used for. I mean, it's fairly irrelevant what somebody wants their equipment to be used for. If it's used to maintain a siege, if it's used by the company for underwater intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, then, I mean, it doesn't matter what Kraken hoped that it would be used for. It's still being used to maintain a violent siege, right?
Kraken would have 100% control of how their equipment is used. I mean, if they knew and they disagreed with how it's being used, they had every ability in the world to cancel the contract and recover the equipment. Why wouldn't they?
Well, that's a good question for Kraken. Why aren't they? Why aren't they canceling that contract when Elbit Systems says that it's being used for underwater intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions in an area that we know is under violent siege? Why does Kraken maintain that contract? That's a great question. And I think that's exactly what protesters are asking.
And it's exactly the question I'll ask if I can manage to convince someone to come on the program, which we'll try. I mean, no harm in trying.
I hope you do. Yeah. I mean, the Seagull USV is a violent tool that's used, that can be fitted with mission modules for anti-submarine warfare and force protection and patrol, including a stabilized, remotely operated 50 caliber machine gun and wire-guided torpedoes for standoff destruction of naval mines and any other underwater threats.
Carmela, you've had the last word. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Eddie.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, there we go. Good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.